Alexander the Great's strange encounters with Nephilim, abominable entities as they called him then, during his campaigns recorded, and this is according to Arian. As we know, every great leader has his historians, his artists, his doctors, his scientists, an entourage of specialists that accompany him, and there's also journals of what his campaigns are all about and what he encounters in new countries. And there have been reports of him encountering Nephilim entities, what we call fallen giants, similar to what the Genesis chapter 6 of the Old Testament describes. The giants, 6-fingered, 6 toes, and even before the flood and even after the flood, they were around. And we know, for example, young David had an encounter with Goliath, and Goliath and his brothers were all giants, 6-fingered, 6-toed. But there are journals recording very strange humanoid hybrids found by Alexander, and his campaign did not go west, it went east, because he was supposedly to do away with these Nephilim entities. Those he couldn't do away with, he threw in pits, covered them with the pits openings covered by copper and metals, and he built pyramids over them. This he did in India and China. One of them is supposedly the White Pyramid in China. Kindly support my Patreon account since YouTube has again demonetized my YouTube channel. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below. And you'll notice on the pyramids of China that the video I made yesterday, the metals that were found there around these pyramids are not known to our earthly metal elements. Now, these strange encounters during the campaigns of Alexander the Great, according to ancient Greek Marianas, during the campaign of Alexander the Great, he was the son of Philip and Olympias, descendant of Hercules and Echoes by origin. Hercules, as we know, was born in Thebes of Athens, about an hour car's drive. Thebes of Greece, about an hour's north car drive from Athens. So supposedly he was a descendant of Hercules, whose ancestors came from Argos to Macedonia and did not serve as rulers of them, Macedonians by force, but according to the law, as described by Arian in Alexandru Anavasis, meaning the campaigns of Alexander the Great, we encounter strange information that historians and readers omit and skip, either because they did not notice it or because they consider it literally fictional and exaggerations. But here we'll try and look at these from another angle, the technology unknown to us and kept secret. After the death of King Philip, Alexander's father, Alexander became commander of his army in 1336 BC at the age of 20. Let's remember that Alexander the Great was prophesied about by Archangel Gabriel to the prophet Daniel, while prophet Daniel and Israel were in exile in Babylon. And the Archangel Gabriel said concerning Alexander, he would be young, ruling only 10 years, and taking over all the known world, and that he would put an end to the Persian Empire, which he did. So, according to Alexander, he became commander in 336 BC at the age of 20, and he decided to continue his father's work and plans with an extra expeditionary force of 37,000 men, plus about 20,000 elite. He began to conquer the known world. After the Granicus River that paved the way for Central Asia, he conquered all of the coastal Phrygia, and Alexander and his army descended south, conquering as many cities as they encountered. They encamped near the river Ermus, 4 kilometers from Sardis, which is in Persia, which was the next target. But it was spring then. Nevertheless, suddenly bad weather occurs, and it thunders wildly, and waters fall from the sky, where the old palaces of Lydia were, and from this Alexander learned that the place where they were to build the temple was revealed by God Zeus, and this he ordered to be done. And this is from the source that I read. So why is the sudden change of weather? Why in the sudden change of weather did he build a temple to Zeus? As we'll see throughout Alexandru Anavasis, sudden changes in the weather were not uncommon, but while somewhere there, almost always, there were old monuments, he did not build, but each time from a temple. However, lightning struck the place, cracks, Hartman, junctions, etc., attracts lightning more than any other in the area. In addition, one theory wants that there were UFOs and around, and they had to be charged by the Earth's lightning. On the 4th day, he arrived in Ephesus and then in Miletus before the Persians, and Nicanor, the commander of the navy, had arrived 3 days earlier and had anchored on the island of Ladi. He had gained more confidence in how they would go into naval battle with the Persians, quote, gave him confidence and a great divine message, because an eagle appeared sitting on the beach facing the stern of Alexander's ships, end quote. So this Alexander took as a good omen. The eagle was considered a good omen. In fact, Alexander predicted that because he was sitting on the beach, their victory would come from the land and not from the navy. And so it exactly did it happen. Possibly the victory is due to some correct strategic intuition of Alexander. However, it's worth remembering that the eagle is a feature of Zeus, a symbol of Zeus, for whom shortly before, as we saw, he built a temple. Now, he was always going to oracles. He had gone to the oracle of Delphi, okay? She didn't want to talk to him, so he went and forcefully put her on her seat in front of on her tripod to force her to give him an oracle. And then she said, okay, well, whatever you want, you're obviously going to obtain. Anyway, when remembering the eagle was a feature, a symbol of Zeus, for he was always making his religious offerings to Zeus and the gods. So we can assume that Nicanor saw a well-known flying object, a UFO, then called it an eagle, which apparently gave them strategic information on how to proceed. Let's remember that even in Tyre, off the island of Lebanon, we have images, we have records of UFOs helping Alexander obtain the island of Tyre, Lebanon, which was, of course, fortified by the Persians, and it fell to Alexander. So, let's see the sequel. Immediately after Miletus, he encamped at Bodrum because he learned that a large force of barbarians and mercenaries was gathering there. He did not waste time and started the siege of the city. So during a break in the siege while Alexander was resting, quote, a swallow flew around and on the bed, each time in another place, and cried with more noise than usual, end quote, until Alexander woke up. The soothsayer Telmiseus said that it means obvious conspiracy against him by friends, quote, because the swallow and companion bird is human and talkative, more or less a bird, end quote. For all this, Alexander informed Parmenion orally and not in letters, quote, because he thought that he should not write openly about any such thing, end quote. If it was just a swallow, there was probably no reason to take such precautions. But the swallow is talkative and friendly. It is dedicated to Isis and Aphrodite. It may have been a tiny UFO called Helidoni, which apparently carried a message to its intruders. Helidoni is a Greek word for swallow. Going to sea from Fasilida to Pergi, this place is not passable when south winds blow. In other words, they would have a significant problem in the argument to pass. Despite this, it leads its own from there when without at least an obvious cause, quote, of violent south winds blowing their northerly winds, not without the divine help, as they themselves explained when they have made the passage easily and quickly, end quote. Notice that while blowing south, suddenly the winds change to north. And it becomes clear from the description of the text that Alexander knew this information. But how did he know that the winds would change as soon as he got there? The text does not tell us that they were waiting for the winds to change. Maybe he was informed by the friendly but talkative swallow? Unless these winds changed artificially and at will. Then he campaigned against CD, Siliu, etc., until he reached central Pyria. He left a guard at Kelanis and himself marched to Gordian, the Gordian knot, where the prophecy said whoever unties that Gordian knot will conquer the whole known earth. And he looked at it and thought and thought and thought, and they asked him to try and untie it, so he took out his sword and hit the Gordian knot with his sword, and that's how he cut it. And then the high priests there said, "You're definitely going to conquer the known world." All right. So he left a guard at Kelanis, and he himself marched on to Gordian, the holy city and navel of the east. In its citadel was the chariot of King Gordian, in which there was the infamous knot, the link, made of a skull whose beginning and end did not seem, that whoever untied it would conquer Asia. Alexander went to the palace, saw the knot, the Gordian knot, and not being able to untie it otherwise, cut it with his sword. So at night that, quote, thunder and lightning appeared from heaven, end quote. The saddle is a bright phenomenon, very often white, that is usually observed in the upper layers of the atmosphere in the polar regions and very rarely in the Mediterranean areas. We're talking about the northern lights. What if by the word saddle they meant something else? The most remarkable thing, however, is that Alexander the next day sacrifices to the gods who, quote, reveal to him the signs and the solutions of the bond. The Gordian knot, that is, end quote. It's interesting to make a parenthesis and talk a little about the Gordian knot. Gordian was a poor farmer. He had 2 oxen. With one, they would pull the plow, and the other ox was pulling her carriage. One day an eagle flew and sat on the yoke of the carriage. In an attempt to find out what this meant, he met a young girl who recommended that he sacrifice to King Zeus. He did the right thing, married her, the girl, and then they had a son together. The son's name was Midas. The Midas touch, everything he touched turned to gold. There were riots in the city at the time, and an oracle said that the one who would come in a carriage would get rid of them. Then Gordian entered the city with his wife and Midas. As soon as the Pyrgians saw them, they immediately made Midas their king. He freed them from the riots, and as a thank you for sending the eagle, dedicated the carriage to Zeus, the carriage on the yoke of which the eagle had sat, which was the bond of the yoke, the Gordian knot. So if we take into account the theory that says that Jupiter, that is, Zeus, was driving a flying chariot which was powered by the electric charges of lightning, in combination with the previous and the next texts, some conclusions are inevitable. Then the Macedonian army commands Tarsus, and a little later makes the Battle of Ison in November 333 BC. He descends to Marathon and Sidon to reach outside the invincible Tyre, the city of Tyre in Lebanon, and to begin to besiege it in August 332 BC, after 7 months of trying. At first, Alexander wanted to make a sacrifice to the Tyrian Hercules, but because for the sacrifice they had to enter the city, the Tyrians suspected a trap and refused. So Alexander assembled a war council. The siege of Tyre, however, was not an easy task. The Tyrians were also great sea emperors, which means that their experience was worthy of the Greek. Then their city was on an island and was fortified with very high walls. For strategic and political reasons, Tyre had to be conquered. Alexander himself easily persuaded his men to launch military operations against Tyre because, quote, some divine sign strengthened his conviction that that night he appeared in his sleep, that he was attacking the wall of fire, and Hercules welcomed him and led him into the city, end quote. Now pay close attention to this belief of Alexander. Alexander, however, did not stand in the dream. The siege began immediately. He ordered an embankment to be dug from the land to the city. In other words, a ramp. In other words, he joined Lebanon, the coast of Lebanon, with the island by building a fake, like a landfill ramp. So they wouldn't have to cross the sea from the coast of Lebanon to Tyre. They would just go across the land-filled ramp, the embankment. And almost in parallel with their, he dug the embankment to be dug from the land to the sea. They erected towers and siege engines, and while the Tyrians retaliated with the first fiery ship in history, but Alexander was not intimidated. He ordered the construction of larger and stronger attack machines and ordered a raid. And almost in parallel with their own efforts to overthrow the wall, quote, listen to this, a triangular formation of flying shields flew over the Macedonian camp, that is Alexander's camp. Flying triangular shields in formation. Then they marched over the city of Tyre in front of the astonished eyes of thousands of warriors. Suddenly the largest shield emitted a ray of light, followed by others, and part of the stone walls of Tyre collapsed as if from mud, end quote. So what did it do? This triangular flying shield hit one of the walls with a laser ray or something? Possibly the specific information to be false or imagined or misinterpreted, as nowhere mentioned in Arrian. However, in a painting from 1458 in the National Library of France shows Macedonians looking at a fiery chariot in the sky. But the Macedonians also succeeded and threw a large part of the wall in another part of it, and after towers and post towers were conquered, Alexander proceeded through the ramparts in the direction of the palace, and finally sacrificed to Hercules for his victory and organized games and candlelight vigils, games meaning athletic games. So as we see, the triangular formation of flying shields refers to modern descriptions by UFOs. Surely we could give many interpretations, perhaps hasty. Whatever these flying shields were, they were certainly not unidentified flying objects, UFOs, but known UFOs, at least to Alexander. He knew of these flying objects, that they would be coming to help him. So he wasn't scared of them. Now Alexander, despite the difficulties he knew he would face, that the certainty of victory from the dream with Hercules, the seer Aristander, that is Alexander's fortune teller or seer, interpreted the dream that Tyre would be conquered with difficulties, since the deeds of Hercules were done with difficulty. But the question is another. Is it a coincidence that after the dream in which Hercules would, quote, receive him and lead him into the city, unquote, they actually welcomed him and led him and his army, flying shields? Unless it was a dream, but did Alexander somehow agree to this reception? Does the dream encrypt the meaning of Alexander's communication with Hercules, his distant descendant and ruler of the fiery shields? After Tyre, he went to Egypt with Gaza as his first target. There he prepared for the attack on the wall, and while Alexander sacrificed during, according to the standard, quote, one of the carnivorous vultures flying over the altar with a stone beats his head from above, which he lifted with both his feet, end quote. A sign, as the seer Aristander explained to Alexander, that he would conquer the city, but he himself had to beware. Alexander was initially kept at a safe distance, but was later forgotten and took part in the battle, where he was wounded by a catapult arrow. He immediately remembered the oracle and rejoiced, because that meant that he would take over the city, and he did. Note that some stones also have healing properties, for example, for snake bites, but the main thing is that some of these stones can make you hear the gods at the time of prayer. Wow, okay. This is very important for the verse. The vultures conveys a hidden message to Alexander from Zeus or Hercules, which is deciphered by the seer Aristander. After the fall of Gaza, after 7 days, he reached Pelusium in Egypt, and from there to Memphis, where he offered a sacrifice to the god Ptah, that is, the god Hephaestus. He descended the Nile, built Alexandria, and moved to the oasis of Shiva, where the oracle of Amun-Zeus, his father, was located. Now, if you see the video, I have a video concerning the supposed tomb of Alexander the Great, confirmed by the Egyptian government as being in the oasis of Shiva. Now, because of what they found there. Now, to get there, to the oasis of Shiva, to get there, one had to cross the desert, which, to note, had no water, no trees, no hills, nothing else distinctive. And it was a vast desert where no matter how hard you walked until you reached your destination, it was as if you were constantly in the same place. In fact, especially when the south wind blew, it covered and with sand traces of the road that led to the oracle. So in these conditions, the army lost its way. Fortunately, though, 2 dragons, quote, marched in front of the army shouting, and Alexander ordered these guides to follow the dragons who believed at the divine point. So there is also the opinion that 2 crows who flew in front of the escort, they became Alexander's guides. Arian himself admits here, quote, that something divine helped him, end quote, but discreetly adds that, quote, the truth of the rumor was taken away by those who told about it in various ways inconsistently, end quote. So yes, Alexander the Great had divine help. Maybe they were not dragons, maybe they were not crows again. Who showed them the right way? Maybe it was flying shields, UFOs, IFOs, or that is identified flying objects as opposed to unidentified flying objects, or something else that seemed that some people deliberately removed the truth of the rumor. A little later, the priests of the holy Ammon greeted Alexander as the son of Ammon, that is, Zeus of the Egyptians. And this is from bibliographical notes of Ariano and Orpheus and Axio Theodore. I've translated this for you from a Greek article. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support.